Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today I am excited to have our friend Daniel Collins on. Daniel is the president of Strategies Group, who is a construction, manufacturing, and distribution software and technology expert who also offers a wide variety of technology solutions and consulting services. So Daniel's an expert in construction technology specifically. That's why we're having him on. And we want to talk today more specifically about the implementation process and how that impacts construction companies out on their job sites. So thank you again for joining us today, Daniel. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Thankful that y'all gave me the opportunity. Not many people will, because I don't know a lot, but I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
I don't think that's the case. I was just at a conference that you were presenting at, and I think you know actually quite a bit. I was impressed with your range of knowledge. So excited to have you on this.
Yeah. No, I try to fly under the radar. If people think you know less, they ask you less. So
right. Well, but you can't hide from me because I know you grew up in the business, and so you can't hide from that, right?
Yeah. Yep. Been around for a while now, so seen the ins and the outs.
Love that. Well, so let's just get into the conversation and talk about when we talk about the word implementation. I mean, what does an optimal implementation of a new process or software solution look like for construction?
So we're going to start with the easy question. All right. So an implementation, wow. For us, we try to even start some of it in the sales process, right? Because you're selecting a product, we need to make sure the product actually fits what you're trying to do. So there's a lot of kind of pulling in the right parties that happens up there. As a whole, we call that kind of our discover point. So we discover what you do, make sure we fit the software to what you're trying to do. Do you have what you need? Do you have more than you need? We don't want you to have more than you need. You need exactly this software. And then we come up with a plan for, okay, here's what you're doing. Here's what we need to do. Sometimes there's improvement in processes. You come up with kind of a scope. To make that successful, there is a lot of pieces. I feel like one of the key pieces is getting the right people in the room when you're talking about what you need. A lot of times you'd have like a CFO, something like that on the call, which is great, and they know high level the company functions like this, and sometimes even more granular depending on the size. But getting some of the day-to-day people in the room, whether that's a controller, AP clerk, something like that, you can get a lot more kind of flavor of what's happening. And I think that's key from the implementation side. And so from the standpoint of kind of pulling in your field people, same thing. You want to get people who know what you're doing, why you're doing it, which I think we can touch on a little later, but that's going to be key for what we call our subject matter experts. So that's step one.
So with step one, I mean, you've got two different areas, of course. You have the back office, and then in construction, we also have the field side, so the mobile-facing crews and employees. So how are those different, and what do you do to address those challenges uniquely?
So they're very different. So if no other reason, then field is usually going to be on a mobile device or a tablet. So they're going to be functioning with the software differently. And they're typically not as involved in the software on the prior software, right? We have a lot of customers that come to us and we talk about, okay, what are you doing? And the response is, paper, pen and paper. We send in time cards, pen and paper, or we have an Excel file that someone sends in and then the office puts it into the system. So that's a big difference. So you're going to encounter a lot of change from the field. And so it's important to keep that in mind. There's a couple things you need to do. Number one, you need to identify what they're doing right now so you can understand where they're coming from. And then you need to identify people that are kind of going to really adapt to the change, and they're going to be excited about the change and champion that change. Because I think one of the things we need to think about here is before the field may not have been doing a whole lot as far as the data entry. And now we're asking that from them, right? In a lot of ways, hey, can you now go in and do this? It's a little bit harder than writing it down on a piece of paper, but then you got to deliver the results from what we're asking them to do, which is a lot of times those data insights. Now that you have project issues logged, what happened a month ago? What happened with this specific vendor? Those kind of things. So it's showing them the wins.
Yeah, it reminds me, it's almost like the New Year's resolution stuff or something where you're actually making a very different change. You're doing something, you're changing behavior and habits. And so like a lot of New Year's resolutions, many people slip back into old habits. So what you mentioned, finding a champion and finding somebody who will help embrace this solution as opposed to be resistant to it. Are there any secrets or tips that from the field perspective, that you found that are helpful?
Yeah. I think I wish there was like a real easy secret, but I think really it comes down to, it kind of depends. So, a lot of times we say, hey, give us your subject matter expert that's going to work and know this system inside and out. And people bring us, this is our field person who's been doing this for 20 years and knows everything about the system. And sometimes they're perfect. They're exactly what you want. Sometimes they're not. And it seems like the piece that's either there or missing is kind of the why behind you do it. So if you're doing, hey, this is how we input our data. Okay, why do you do it that way? If the answer is, well, you've just done it that way, that's probably not the right person. If they're able to kind of articulate, well, we do it because X, Y, and Z, and this is the importance of it, that's your person. And which is weird because sometimes that's someone who's a couple months into a job. Sometimes that's someone who's been there since they were 20 and they're now, in their 60s. It doesn't, the age, the time frame, all that doesn't seem to really matter. It's really about the why. They're understanding why they do these things.
Yeah, and I think in my experience and history, it seems like when employees are new to an organization, they're already involved in a lot of new things. So they're a little more open and prepared and planning on doing things differently than what they've done in the past. Whereas if you've got a 20-year veteran, they're very set in the way that they do things. And so change can be more difficult for them. So maybe that's a part of why.
For sure. And I think there's some pieces that you can do to kind of combat that, because your 20-year veteran is a super valuable resource. They're probably incredible at what they do, right? And so you've got to bring them along on the change. And then it's more of, if they're someone who's not necessarily your subject matter expert, then you're going to want to make sure you show them the win. What is the win for this person? And make it very, very valuable for them, because you are, at the end of the day, asking more of these people than they were prior being asked.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think what you're alluding to is right on, and that is you need to meld the two together and leverage the best parts of both of those folks and their roles and maybe their approach to things, so that you can ultimately get everybody up to speed, but also not lose that domain expertise that your 20-year vet has.
Exactly.
On the actual projects.
Exactly. And I think it's a combination, because you identify these people that are really going to own and believe in and buy into this change, this new software that's going to make their lives better at the end of the day. They kind of see the picture. They need to bring along the rest of the team with them. And I think sometimes some errors that are made in implementations is we don't get those people correctly identified, or we don't get them involved until it's too late. We've already kind of designed everything and it's going to do what it does now, and you just got to buy into it. There's less buy-in in that circumstance. People tend to buy in more when they are a part of the decision.
I love that and totally agree. So tell me this, when you're out there on these projects and you're dealing with these situations, what are some of the most common missteps that you seem to witness companies falling into, or what kind of traps could you advise them against?
Definitely never on our side, right? We don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
No, we learn a lot from mistakes. So... But so I think that one of the keys is as error-free as you can make something. So people are experiencing change, and honestly, the longer they've been doing whatever they've been doing, the more change will kind of disrupt their day, because it's almost like driving a car. You go in an auto drive mode and you're like, oh, I'm at home. I don't really remember how I got here. It's because it's second nature. So we're now changing that to, you're running a different route, and people have been driving that same route for 20 years. It's going to be hard. And so you're going to have to make it as little difficulty as possible, right? Remove the blockers. They're going to experience errors anyways. That's part of software. But if you can test and vet and make them aware of what they need to do and give them documentation and basically take it through its paces and have as few kind of system errors versus user errors, that's the best thing. Because to a end user in the field, if I'm on my app and I'm scrolling, I click a button and I get a big X, I'm like, oh, it's broken, right? Especially if you don't know why the X is there. So the fewer X's you can get on your screen, the better off you're going to be as a whole. So that's part of that implementation, not only on the implementation company, so whatever partner you're working with, but also on the team at the customer site. They've got to run it through its paces. It's time consuming, but it'll make adoption much, much easier.
Yeah, that's a great point. We always use the analogy, 3 strikes, you're out. And so it's like, we really, you can have something come up once and maybe twice, but if it happens again, then you lose credibility and buy-in very quickly, especially from the field that's already experiencing a lot of change as it is. Yeah, well, it depends on the ump, right? So then obviously the less bugs, the less glitchy, the smoother that's going to be. How do you, when you talk about buy-in from maybe a field manager or a foreman or somebody who's managing this process for you, or a champion, so to speak, I mean, how much understanding and knowledge do they have to have of the whole overview in order to get something rolled out correctly?
That's a good question. I think they need to really understand the why behind whatever they're putting in. Where does it feed to? What's the output of that? Not just, hey, click this button. I don't personally think they need to know, as from the field, they need to know like, hey, when you do this, here's where the debits and credits go. They probably don't care, right? They just need to know, here's the significant impact. Probably even as simple as saying, this is going to impact the general ledger. That's important, right? And then I've found that it's hard to relay this, and there's, varying levels of success with this. But if I ask you to put in a time card for yourself, and then everyone in the field does it, right? Now my back office doesn't have to deal with that. They don't have to put all that time in, which had that extra resource. That gives them an extra 8 hours a week. So now they can go do more valuable things because we're putting that in the hands of the people who actually know where it's supposed to go. They're going to code it right, and it's going to take them 10 minutes. So, maybe not even. So it's not necessarily as beneficial all the time to that person, but for the company. And that's where the change champions come in. That's where the CFO comes in to explain, like, you doing this 5 minutes will free up 8 hours for this person.
Yeah.
And it's a heart connection. And some people really get it, and some people are like, I don't care. I still have to put my time card in.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
As someone who does that myself, I understand. I put time cards in every week. So.
Yeah. And I think reaffirming those values and benefits, especially initially, can also add value. Like a superintendent could call his foreman on a Friday afternoon and say, hey, how's it going? How'd the job go? Where you at? Oh, you're headed home already? Oh, that's nice. Because you're not having to fill out paperwork still. Boy, I love that new software system, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So whatever companies could do to remind the staff and the field employees and those that are now using this new system of those benefits and values to them directly in their personal life, not just, okay, here's the ROI for the business, but also for you as, a member of our team, but also a father and a husband, or, a son, whatever it is, a buddy that wants to go out, for a weekend getaway with his friends or whatever it is. You can get to your personal life a lot quicker because you're not stuck doing paperwork that maybe you had to do before when it was manual.
Exactly. Yeah. The what's in it for me is huge. That's definitely a key takeaway that we found.
That's a great point. So also when you talk about a champion or a subject matter expert, what should companies be looking for to determine who those best people are in the field?
They probably, I feel like people know right? You work with someone enough, you're like, this person gets it. Now, it's still difficult because then there's some levels of navigating the politics of the work environment, right? If you've got someone who's 6 months into a job that's a good fit for that role and somebody who's 20 years in who may not be, that's always awkward to navigate. But I think there's a way you can make it work together. You can put both of them on the project. They can kind of feed off each other. But they definitely need to look for people who understand the implications of what they're doing in the software on the business, right? Not just what they do, why they do it. I know it sounds repetitive, but I feel like the why piece is huge for getting the right people involved.
Okay, so do you find, are there some other practices besides, once you get the right people involved, how do you call out, where this time is going to come in, the extra time that someone's going to perceive they need to put into this new system? I mean, how's a great way to almost schedule that in their mind so that they know, okay, now's the time that I need to go and do X, Y, and Z in this new system because this is the workflow that we've designed. How do you come up with that for different companies?
Yeah, so typically once we've gotten the people assigned and then we go through, we start to build the system. A lot of it comes pre-configured with a couple things that we do in our company to shortcut a lot of the implementation, make it quicker for the customer. But there's some design elements still that we meet with them and say, how do you feel about this? What does this need to go to? How are you going to process this type of service transaction? Whatever that may be. A lot of times it's reporting elements as well. And then we move into and we show them the system. Hey, this is what it's going to look like. Does this work? This is where those SMEs will be signing off on what we've done. From there, we like to turn the keys back over to those subject matter experts, to those people. And we say, hey, we've got a list of scenarios that we would like you to process through like 4 or 5 times each. I'd just block out a couple hours a week. Usually, we say in that phase, it could be, depends on how many areas they're in. For field service, I would say probably 4 hours a week should be okay for like 2 to 3 weeks. If major issues come up, we correct them and deal with that. But that's a good amount of time to spend just really kind of toying around in the software.
And it feels almost like somebody in the office needs to also oversee and be involved in part of the field side. Is that right? Like a liaison?
Yeah, there's usually a project manager over the whole project, and they kind of combine the pieces. So they know a little bit about all of the system. And we let the customer define that. They're responsible for kind of leading, managing, and holding everyone accountable on the client side. We have a project manager on our side who's the same way. We like to go to that person, make sure that the right people are involved, because to your point, if I go out and let's say I work an appointment, I log into my app, I do everything, I leave my notes, I complete it, I go back and the app is completed, I go to my next one, but there's more to that transaction, right? Typically, you've got a supervisor that reviews the time, make sure it's corrects what needs to be, and then closes it. And then usually from there, they either process the billing or it goes to the AR team and they process it and create the invoice. So there could be up to 3 steps to get it all the way to an invoice to make sure you can put the time in, process the appointment, you bill the customer correctly, review the time, change the time, and it actually hits the right GL accounts. And that's usually 3 separate people.
Well, that's nice because what you're describing is almost like a small conveyor belt, and
exactly.
And the next guy down the line could call out something or bring something to the guy before them's, their attention and say, hey, you missed this, or what about that, or where's this thing, so that they don't actually crank it off of the assembly line of the conveyor belt without a
Yeah, it's kind of a self-correcting thing. Someone's going to catch the problem, and that's how we make sure and run things through their paces. We ask the customer to do that. It's not only training for them to get used to it, it's also helpful for us. If we run into an error, let's make sure it's configured right in this way, whatever that takeaway is.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to circle back to something that you brought up earlier. I've just been thinking about as we've been talking. You've talked about getting that field buy-in and having somebody own it, finding out the WIFM, which is short for what's in it for me. Have you found any practices or approaches, or do you have a standard part of your process that you do in order to make sure in advance that you've got all of those key things identified? Like, do you interview field people and say, what are your challenges? What are your pain points? What do you hate about what you're currently doing and wish were different? What do you love about what you're doing and want to maintain? I mean, do you have anything like that, sort of an audit for field-facing staff?
We do. We actually have a series of questions that we ask, and we send it to the customer actually in the sales cycle. We say, hey, fill this out. It's kind of a way that we build the requirements for the implementation. What are you doing currently? What do you hate? We've got a sales rep that says, what takes you too much time? What costs you too much money? And what do you just plain hate? Those 3 questions usually get you to the root of the problem. And then we try to address it with either process or software. But I think we get those people involved in that questionnaire. It gives us the right information.
I love that. And without getting into too specific of software systems or logos, I mean, I know we work with your team to help companies collect field data, project management information, integrate it with payroll and accounting. But what other types of software solutions from a just general solution perspective do you provide at your organization?
So we sell and implement Acumatica primarily, and then we integrate with a ton of other, integrated solutions, other technologies that can kind of take the core, because Acumatica is excellent at a couple things. And it goes out and it lets some other softwares be excellent in other areas and bring the data in through an open API. So there's a lot of really strong connections out there. We find that in the field, there's a lot of need for time entry, data keeping, that kind of stuff. And so we usually do leverage, like y'all, other technologies to help us get that data from the field in a more consumable, easy to enter format and provide it back to the Acumatica system. So we see, timekeeping. We see a couple areas of some rental options that we see a good bit. We handle a couple things internally on the reporting side, but nothing necessarily outside of the Acumatica platform. Trying to think what else. There's a couple integrated payment solutions that we have utilized. We use currently with ourselves. We actually run Acumatica internally, so it's kind of fun. We get to be the end user, and in some cases the cobbler's kids, right?
Right, no stuff shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do all these cool systems, and then we're like, oh, we should probably work on our own. So
yeah.
It's an interesting scenario. But yeah, I think the Acumatica marketplace has been really solid over the past few years. It's grown. They've even vetted more and more to make sure the integrations are really good. So the software is good. I think working with different partners on the tech side and working with their implementation teams, we've learned a ton.
That's awesome. But we alluded to this earlier in the intro, but you grew up in the industry. So much like I came from construction. I spent about a decade in the construction side, and then most of the last 2 decades, I'll be 50 this year. So that kind of tells you where the last 30 years of my life have been. But I'm so 2/3 on the software side. Since you started, or at least watched your dad at a young age and people that were mentors to you to now, what changes have been awesome to witness? What are you surprised about? And what are you most excited about today?
Oh, gosh. I think one of the most interesting changes has been just the market in general for software. There's a couple pieces that I've seen over even just the past 5 to 10 years that have been interesting. I think the decision makers has changed at a lot of businesses. I think in the ERP space, we used to predominantly deal with controllers, CFOs, right? Because it's their accounting solution. Now with Acumatica and solutions like that, where you can do more than just accounting in your ERP, you can do some project management functionality. You can integrate to other things. You can do your entire business on this system. We're now working with CFOs, CEOs. A lot of time we work with project managers. They seem to drive a lot of decisions. And so they're able to be brought into that sales cycle. So it's almost become a bigger sales cycle because there's more involved. So the sales cycle is lengthened. One of the cool transitions that I've been excited about, just because I think this is great for everybody, is the selling of SaaS. So every year I need you to renew if you're my customer. That is a entire 180 from the industry prior. Not that anyone was this way, but I would sell you software, you'd pay it all up front, and then I hope it goes well for you, So I am required every year to be back in front of the customer, and our company comes and says, hey, we hope we did a good job this year. Would you like to stay with us as a customer? So we are incentivized to keep people happy, which is good for us because we have better working relationships with customers. It aligns with our values a lot, that we want to put the customers in the priority of how we do business, but it also is great for the customers, right? They want to be happy, surprise. So, the fact that they're now primary there, that's huge. And it creates a good working relationship. It creates more of a partnership, which is how we like to work. Less of a, I give you something, you give me something, and then we go our separate ways kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. So those have been some interesting shifts.
Yeah, the biggest shift, of course, is on-premise server-based software where the server box is, at the construction company's office in the back room next to the broom closet.
Yep.
To now it's hosted on Amazon or Microsoft or other server farms.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, you can get to it from anywhere, which I think that's why it expanded to all the different parts of the business rather than just the accounting staff. Because now everyone can access it from the field. You can look at it on a mobile view. You don't have to be in the office or through a VPN or something complicated to get to that server. And then it's also on AWS, which is pretty darn good about keeping their server up and running and safe. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've witnessed the same thing, and it's been amazing in our business to switch from server-based and locally hosted to cloud. And I'd say 95% of the customers absolutely love the benefits of the value that they get. So it's a win-win for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it absolutely has changed how businesses function. But it's been cool to watch. It's been cool to see the change. And it's kind of accelerated through COVID happening. It was an interesting time as a partner with Acumatica because a lot of friends and family were like, businesses are slowing down. We're not doing as much. I was like, I feel busier than we've ever been because everyone says, hey, I need it. I need it now. I need it tomorrow. Can you guys get me up and running? All of a sudden there was a bit of a push because people needed access to their data.
Yeah, visibility became the paramount concern for most businesses that we serve as well. So definitely helped us boom in our efforts and our ability to help companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. What would you say, Daniel, that the takeaway would be today? What do you hope the listeners move down the road with and remember about our conversation?
Oh, goodness. Probably all the stuff you mentioned, none of the stuff I mentioned. So,
nice.
No, I think it's important to think about when you're going into an implementation, it is not a spectator sport, right? We didn't mention it a whole lot on today's call, but there's got to be buy-in from the executive level too. They're championing the change because they have to pass that down to the team. And then at the ground level with all your field techs or back office, whatever it is, you need to have people who are bought in there. They will make or break your implementation. So I've said this multiple times. I think it catches people a little off guard. I'm like, you could buy Acumatica, you could buy Sage, you could buy QuickBooks. They're only going to be as good as they are implemented, right? So, Acumatica out of the box without implementing anything, it's okay. It's not excellent, but it's okay. But you get the right team involved, it can be a super excellent product. And I think that's the most important thing in these interactions with these customers. So hopefully they take that away. I don't know. Maybe they won't.
No, that's great. No, I appreciate that. And it's been a lot of fun talking today. I've appreciated working with the Strategies Group for well over a decade. I think it was at least 15 years ago when I was down in Atlanta visiting your offices for the first time. And I'm thankful that we have an opportunity to continue to work together even today and look forward to continuing serving this wonderful industry that we're a part of in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on here. Hopefully I was helpful. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's been great. Yeah. Thanks again for joining us. And we'll look forward to meeting with you again down the road.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.